With me today is Jennifer Cote, co-founder and CEO at Opalia, the first Canadian company to make real milk with mammary cells. Jennifer, welcome to Say Hi to the Future.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Okay, Jennifer, you were trained in the behavioral sciences.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
were you were you just sitting there one day saying, ah, to heck with that? Let's go into AgriTech. Let's create functional, delicious, sustainable dairy made from mammary cells. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, not really. If I were to talk to my child self, I would never have imagined making milk in a lab. But yeah, I went from psychology, which is basically studying human behavior, to business, which is all about people at the end of the day. And it was really during the pandemic that the switch happened. Obviously, the whole world was shut down, so it was kind of a good period to reflect. And I wanted to have, I think, a bigger impact for myself. I've always been interested in sustainability. I had been vegetarian since I was about 18 years old, so it was very close to my heart. And my co-founder just said, "Are you interested to start this project?" And I was like, "Why the hell not?" And then I just jumped in,
Okay.
and here we are 5 years later.
But where does the idea come from? On one level, it seems like a natural idea. I don't mean it that way, but it does it in the other way. It seems like, well, we've done it for hundreds or thousands of years, maybe more. What was the need for change or the drive for change?
Yeah. Well, obviously, we've been kind of in a period of transition for a few decades now, with going from more and more plant-based and nut-based alternatives for dairy, and obviously for meat as well. So we've been following that. And some companies have came up with technologies to make real meat, but from cells, from animal cells. So we were really interested by that technology, and we didn't see anything really for dairy. And we thought dairy was a huge opportunity, being that it's like an $865 billion market. And most people, they have no trouble giving up meat. But when you say give up cheese, that's where they draw the line. Like they really won't give up cheese. So we thought, why not use cells, but to make cheese and yogurt and butter and all of the other dairy products. And that's kind of how we got thinking that we could do this.
Take me through some of your steps to market, though, in the sense of, so the pandemic is here. You have this sort of personal reawakening. Your business partner, or your now business partner, calls you and discusses the idea. But where do you start? A science team, a lab connection. Like, where does this all sort of move from? I'd like to do something different to this is significant.
Yeah, we were fortunate enough to have someone in our network who really wanted this idea to come to life. So they gave us a little bit of funding to get us started. And since my co-founder and I didn't really have the technical skills to actually do cell culture, we reached out to a PhD student who was working on a PhD thesis, and had published an article that really kind of resonated with us about a way to grow mammary cells in vitro, basically. And so we reached out, we said, hey, we have this project. Do you want to help us get a proof of concept going? Since it was a pandemic, as I mentioned, it was kind of hard to get access to a lab to do any kind of experiment. So thankfully, she was at the end of her PhD and she had access to a lab. So she really helped us out to do the proof of concept, and that got us a little bit more funding. And from there, she quit the project, but we hired more people that had a similar experience, and we grew the team from there, attracted a little bit of investment here and there, and some non-dilutive funding since we're in Canada. And yeah, I really went from oh, let's do this cool thing over the summer to actually like incorporating a business and hiring employees, and yeah.
But when you say you've received some funding, you've actually raised over 3 million in capital, which is that's tremendous. And I mean, the pandemic was only a few years ago. So what was the incredible attraction? I know you mentioned the size of the market, but the need to change, is there a difference in the final product and the nutritional value? Like, what drives that type of money to an idea so quickly?
Yeah, I mean, the size of market helps. And I think that obviously it's no secret that the population keeps increasing and the demand for protein keeps increasing as well. And we're kind of at capacity in terms of resources for animals and for the feed for those animals. So a lot of the corporates and the investors, they're looking for a solution to keep being, well, they want to be proactive and they want to keep increasing their business as they should. And it's not a possibility with kind of the traditional methods. So they're looking at alternatives, more in the like plant-based and nut space, but these alternatives aren't really performing and people are really adopting them. So what they want to do is get closer and closer to real milk. And I think that's what we offer them is the ability to have the exact same products that they've been using for hundreds of years without, investing millions of dollars to redo a product profiling or functionality study with new ingredients who like are not clear to function or not or bring the nutritional profile that customers are looking for. And since we're making real milk, then it's closer to that endpoint that they are used to working with.
And when you're talking about real milk, and mammary cells, these are mammary cells from a cow.
Yes.
So how do we go from the mammary cells to real milk?
Yeah, so basically what we did is we took a small tissue sample from a cow and then we grew these cells in the lab. And these cells are close to immortal, so we don't need to go back to the cow. They've been kind of spontaneously immortalized, and I know it would be good to have that for humans, but only for cells currently. So these cells grow in our lab, and we feed them kind of a Gatorade mix with sugars, amino acids, vitamins, minerals, and then they grow. And once we have enough for like the right number of cells, we are able to activate lactation in them using kind of a mix of molecules and proteins to mimic the pregnancy in the body, and then we're able to make whole milk from these cells.
So when you talk about the cells being practically immortal, do you need to continuously harvest cells, if that's the right terminology, to increase capacity? Like how does that work?
Yeah, no, the cells naturally double every 24 hours. So you start with a couple million cells and then they divide and then you have more and more and you freeze some and then you keep growing some and you eventually kind of have a pretty significant number of cells that you can work with to be able to mimic the number in a cow. In a cow, usually there's about 5 trillion cells that are actively lactating. So if we want to get close to the other production, we really have to get as close as we can to that amount of cells, highly productive cells.
Okay. And where are you now on that chain to making real milk? Have you tasted this in a lab? Like where are you?
Yeah, we have. So we've made a small quantity in the lab and we've tasted it. We've even let it kind of coagulate over time in the fridge and it smelled like actual cheese, like Parmesan cheese. And the taste was also very similar to milk. We are not yet at the level of producing, liters per day or per week. We're working our way up there, but really soon that will be the case. And we already have kind of projects on the horizon to turn that milk into cheese and butter and ice cream and yogurt. And that's really the part I'm most excited for.
It also sounds like once you get this going, it's transportable, if you will, to maybe parts of the world where there's malnutrition, or it might not be, the number of cows or the ability to generate enough milk or milk protein for the population. You can supplement that. Is that correct?
Yeah, there are a lot of benefits to the technology. Since there are cells that are growing in, closed systems, you don't really need to rely on climate. Like if your cows aren't able to live in a desert or like the Arctic, for example, you can have local milk supply if you have access to water and electricity. So that's definitely a possibility, and we want to also like shorten the supply chains by having more local production and all of these countries. So that's some of the partnerships we're working with countries and corporate partners who are interested to really kind of co-localize the production of milk to their transformation facility, for example. So milk straight from the production facility into the cheese processing facility, for example. So no need to go get the milk at, I think, 100 miles per average from farm to transformation facility. It's right next door.
Okay, so I mean, the sustainability impact is enormous. Um, in the end, it's what it sounds like.
Yeah, there has been a lot of life cycle analyses done on similar technologies that can show that we can reduce up to 97% the GHG emissions, up to like 99% less water, less land as well. Like there's a lot of opportunity just by eliminating an animal that's like 800 or so like pounds or something. Like it's really big animals that are just reduced to a small amount of cells, basically. You don't need to use up all of that energy to sustain the animal. You just have a cell that requires the minimal elements of food.
You have a lot of passion for what you're doing, and I have, for those who are going to be watching on YouTube, you can see it as well as hear it. Growing up, I mean, where does the passion come from? I mean, were there STEM programs? Were there other activities you did or you took on, or you just and not what you might think of as a naturally passionate human being? I mean, because and then I'll stop my rambling. But this is fascinating for me because I've it's we talk to future thinkers, but this is very different, in my mind at least. Um, so again, where does that passion come from, or that sense of curiosity, and how have you sort of, grabbed onto it?
Yeah, no, I wish I did like STEM programs when I was in high school. Actually, I was not a fan of math and biology by no means. But yeah, if I knew I could have done something like that, I definitely would have been more interested. So now it's a lot of what I do is going into schools and talking to teenagers and children to talk about the avenues of science because I think that's just fascinating what we can do with science. But I think a lot of the passion is just from a personal standpoint to have an impact on the environment. Like I know where we are right now, we just overconsume everything, and it's just sad to see what we've done to the planet and the animals. And like we've kind of forgotten that these are emotional beings and we're just growing them for our own pleasure at the end of the day. And when there's technology that can replace that, then I think that's a huge opportunity we absolutely must tap into. That's what motivates me is just looking at these cows. There's so many videos on the internet of cows with their babies and just like removing the baby to like it's just a terrible industry as a whole. In Canada, it's gotten a lot better, but at the end of the day, you're still, milking a cow when the milk is intended for their baby. So I want to replace that with technology, and I think that's definitely possible.
When you do something like you're doing that is potentially so disruptive to a massive industry,
Yeah.
do you start to get pushback?
Actually, not to this day. I think we're seeing a lot more interest than we first expected. We were expecting a lot of pushback, but I think it's in the collective that we need to change something in the way we're making our food today. And also, I think that there's more and more awareness that it's not about totally replacing the industry. It's about more collaboration and partnerships. And there's a wide array of technologies that are gonna, make our whole food system more sustainable in the end. And we are anticipating 2 more billion people on the planet, and just these people need more food. So if we can tap into that and, make the transition a bit easier towards sustainable protein, then we would have played the role we want to play.
Okay. Let's tap into another side of this because you come up with the idea, game changer, potential industry changer. You've raised a lot of money. talk about that process because there's a lot of young entrepreneurs or early stage entrepreneurs. I forget about age demographics. What's it like to go out and start pitching and convincing people that this different and fully disruptive idea is worth their money?
Yeah, it's daunting, I would say at first. I didn't see myself being an entrepreneur at all. I'm kind of an introverted person in general, so that's definitely really out of my comfort zone. But I found that if you find an idea that you're really passionate for, it's just easier to have these conversations because yeah, you have to be open to feedback and you have to listen if the opinion of people who can maybe guide you towards another place. But at the end of the day, if you're really convinced about your idea, then saying like hearing no every other day, like from an investor or partner or customer, is not really going to change your end goal, which is to make that happen. And I think that's really where kind of resilience and motivation comes in. You have to be convinced about your idea if you want to come into entrepreneurship and build your business. I think it's a really difficult journey and difficult path. It's a lot of stress, it's a lot of hard work, but at the end of the day, if you know why you're doing this and your mission aligned, then I think it makes the whole journey a little bit easier.
And you talked about, well, a number of ideas there, but one was hearing no every other day. Um,
More like every day,
I,
actually.
yeah, and it's fun. I mean, I'm 35 years into an entrepreneurial journey at this point, but I speak to audacity as being one of the most important things that we have as entrepreneurs because um, people will tell you you're crazy, you're silly, you're not you, maybe more me, you're stupid in what you're doing or whatever. And you have to find a way to get past that, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to prove the naysayers wrong.
Yeah, well, you have to do that, but you also, and this may be really tough to act on, but when you do start finding money or attracting money, to make sure it's aligned money,
Yeah.
to make sure that they actually believe not just in your vision, but your mission and how you're going to go about it versus, you know, we'll give you the money, but you're going to have to do it this way now after they've met you for a minute and a half.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. I think that for us, it's been clear since the beginning that's what we have to do. We've been very fortunate. All of our investors are fully on board with what we're doing and they're supporting us. And I think that stems from them, but also from me being extremely transparent with them from day one. And that makes it harder in the fundraising process because sometimes you're saying things that investors don't want to hear, like your timelines are long or you have to invest a lot of money to make it work. But after, having all of these no conversations, you start getting to the yes conversations because you're like going through a funnel of people that don't resonate to actually more and more resonating. And I think that's where another step of making the whole journey a bit easier is to really find people who align with you because when you're trying to make something fit in a mold that's not made, it's just really harder. And then your journey is already so hard innovating and doing the work. Then if you have to every day talk to a wall and your investors are just not on board and are pushing you in a different direction, it's just making everything else just more painful than it has to be.
Yeah, that's a critical lesson for all entrepreneurs. Again, that the right money, the aligned money, and yes, some things will take a little longer and cost a little more.
Yeah,
I've had this discussion or argument with a lot of investors who always are looking for that hockey stick in revenue.
yeah.
Um, things don't go from 0 to 100 million in 2 years, 3 years for the most part because you can't scale it. I mean, is that also part of what you find?
Absolutely. And I keep hearing these analogies recently that VC was built on hardware, actually. That's kind of how it happened. Silicon Valley was
Mhm.
because of chip manufacturing, and then it ended up powering the software industry, and then the VC turned into a software industry, and revenues were just so much easier to obtain fast because of the low capex that it became a software industry. But we're now at a point in time where software isn't going to solve our most critical challenges. So we need to go back to hardware and we need the capital to follow that trend and really go and take more risk into the more capital intensive companies because that's how we're going to unscrew climate. We have to find solutions that are actually tangible and not just, virtual reality.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so on that note, as you describe it, and the build time, the investment, what is your business model? How do you go to market, and who are your ideal customers?
Yeah, so basically, we are a protein or milk manufacturer. We are B2B, targeting more companies that will then use our milk to transform it into dairy products. So our ideal customers are customers who really want to make, more sustainable dairy, but not compromise on the quality or the taste or the nutrition of their products. And we've had a lot of interest so far. We have about 6 or 7 LOIs with partners who want to do R&D pilot projects with us or support us in different ways. And we're seeing a lot of interest in making not only a specific part of the dairy, but also like just building a supply chain that's more efficient. So I was talking earlier about co-localizing of production. I think we're seeing a lot more interest in self-sufficiency for countries. So that's kind of the trend we're following is to be able to, each country be self-sufficient on their milk production and eventually meat and fish and all of these other amazing technologies out there.
Do you become a dairy, or do you become a supplier to a new type of dairy? How exactly does that work?
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna evolve as this product gets on the market, but so far it's really more about getting the protein in the hands of the customers. We're gonna probably start as a kind of a co-branding product to, offer the possibility of milk and dairy products to customers for them to test. There's a lot of education and communication that has to be done around the technology and, how is it made from and all of these questions. So we're gonna have to, do some work as a Opalia in there, and eventually we're just gonna probably white label it with a bunch of partners.
Okay. Well, I've been speaking with Jennifer Cote, co-founder and CEO at Opalia. Jennifer, you are, I believe, on your way to the AgriTech Venture Forum in Toronto.
I am.
So tell us about that and what you will be doing on stage.
Yeah, so I will be pitching Opalia on stage at the AgriTech Venture Forum. We will also be having a booth there. And basically, we're going to speak about our fundraising. Currently, we have a round open for $5 million, and we're hoping that will fuel our path to commercialization and allow us to obtain regulatory approval and scale to high enough scale so that we're able to start doing R&D pilot projects with our partners.
Very cool. Well, Jennifer, it's been a pleasure. And it's been fascinating to learn about a new technology and a new type of future for dairy. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Take care.